All right. We need to continue what we started and hopefully finish it up. In the first hour, we talked about the killing of Qassem Soleimani in Iraq. He's the leading general in Iran. He was killed. We talked about how whenever these kind of major events happen, it's responsibility of the church and of Christians to take a few minutes to stop and to think about these situations so that we can ensure that we think about these situations biblically, we think about these situations correctly, and we have to do our best to struggle through them. We talked about whenever you have a situation like this, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. What are some of the ways we can look at a situation like this of the killing of Qassem Soleimani in Iraq? What are some different ways we can look at it? Number one, we can look at it from a legal perspective, and when we looked at it from a legal perspective, there's lots of disagreements on whether this was a legal thing or an illegal thing, and that debate will continue on. But from a Christian's perspective, just because something is legal, it doesn't make it moral. So we do not conflate the idea of legality with morality. Those are two separate things. All right. Number two, we can look at it from a political standpoint. And how do you look at it from a political standpoint? If you're pro-Trump, you're pro the attack. If you're anti-Trump, you're anti the attack. All right? Does that make sense? That's a political way of looking at it. Third way of looking at it, strategically, from a strategic standpoint, and we could get into what was the strategy here, what is going on, and we won't get into all of that. What's the fourth way we can look at it? From a nationalistic perspective or nationalism. What is nationalism? Nationalism, as defined, identification with one's own nation and support for its interests, and specifically to the exclusion or detriment of the interests of other nations. Nationalism and Christianity should not be merged in any way, shape, or form. Nationalism has infiltrated the Christian church since 2016 with the election of President Trump. President Trump was elected on a nationalistic platform. Very much nationalistic at many times. Now, there are times he's not so much nationalistic, but we could get into sometimes the contradiction there. But definitely, that was a nationalistic kind of wave came into America, and Christians bought into it, and he got elected based off a nationalistic platform, and he got elected primarily by Christians. So that is, we could talk about that. Then, what's the next way we can look at it? The last way? Okay, the just war theory, and what's the just war theory is an attempt to look at it from what perspective? A biblical and theological perspective, all right? So let's remind ourselves briefly of the just war theory, and then we're going to spend a lot of time looking at it. All right, here we go. Just war theory, it's also referred to as what? Just war theory is also referred to as? A doctrine, a tradition of military ethics. It's studied by whom? Military leaders, theologians, and policymakers. What is the purpose of the doctrine? To ensure war is morally justifiable. How is it done? Through a series of criteria which must all be met for a war to be considered just. The criteria split into two categories. What are the two categories? The right to go to war and the right conduct within war. The first concerns itself with the morality of going to war. The second with moral conduct within the war, and then some believe there should be a third category. All right, the morality of post-war settlement and reconstruction. All right, just war theory basically teaches that war, while terrible, but less so with the right conduct, is not always the worst option. Important responsibilities, undesirable outcomes, or preventable atrocities may justify war. All right. Opposition to just war theory. Now, this is where we stopped here. We'll move into this. Just war theory, really, there are two usually paths of opposing just war theory. All right? The first path of opposing just war theory is the path of the pacifist. All right? And what does the pacifist teach? There has never been and can never be a justifiable basis for war. That's the pacifist approach. There has never been and can never be a justifiable basis for war. All right? What's the other argument against the just war theory? The nationalistic approach. The nationalistic approach which says what? That the only thing required to make a war justifiable is to serve a nation's interest. Boom, it's justifiable. If it justifies our interest, it's justifiable. We don't need any criteria. In other words, if America wants to go in and blow up a nation, it's justifiable because America said so, all right? That's a nationalistic approach, okay? Those are the two sides to opposing it. There may be a third one. Now, I've got a lot more here about nationalism, but we've spent a lot of time already talking about it. All right, so here we go. Now you ready? Now we can get into just war theory, just war doctrine. All right. Where does Christian just war theory begin? Or with whom does just war theory begin? In church history. Augustine is the main promoter of the Christian just war theory, and who's the second and critical person in church history to promote just war, or to really, I think he really kind of really laid out the criteria. Augustine didn't necessarily give us the criteria, he kind of gave us the philosophy. Okay? But someone else came along and really laid it out in a very systematic way. So first is Augustine, who's the second? Aquinas, yes. Thomas Aquinas is the second individual. All right. All right. St. Augustine, sometimes referred to as St. Augustine or Augustine, led the groundwork for the just war theory, but he also did so with caution. He wrote this in 418 A.D. St. Augustine said, "Peace should be the object of your desire. War should be waged only as a necessity in order that peace may be obtained." So why do you fight a war? To obtain peace. What should be your only goal? Peace. What should be the object of your desire? Peace. All right? And only war. Therefore, even in waging war, cherish the spirit of a peacemaker, that by conquering those whom you attack, you may lead them back to the advantages of peace. As violence is used towards him who rebels and resists, so mercy is due to the vanquished or captive. Since that time, the church has used his teaching as a basis for determining when just force is necessary to protect the innocent. That is the basis of the Catholic teaching of just war. The Catholic Church has a very systematized approach to just war theory. The evangelical Protestant does not. The evangelical Protestant doesn't have a clue, and that's why I think the basis of most evangelical Protestants when it comes to war is not Bible, it is nationalism. Nationalism is the dominant thinking within the Protestant church. I reject nationalism outright, and that's why people always accuse me of being a liberal, communist, socialist, or who knows what. I reject nationalism, right? I'm a Christian first. That's what we're supposed to be. Right? Now again, I'm glad that we have a small church, because we're a large church, people would already get up and walk out and get mad at me, and I'd be fired by Monday. But the church has to be able to deal with these issues. It's just, if you go to a church and they can't address these issues, what's the point of being there? You've got to talk about these issues because they're relevant to what's happening in our world, all right? So, Augustine claimed that while individuals should not resort immediately to violence, God has given the sword to government for good reason. And what does he base that off of? Romans 13:4. Remember why I told you, that's why I told you to look up that verse, because that is one of the bases here, right? Augustine argues that Christians, as part of a government, need not be ashamed of protecting peace and punishing wickedness when forced to do so by a government. Augustine asserted that this was a personal, philosophical stance. What is here required is not a bodily action, but an inward disposition. The sacred seat of virtue is in the heart. All right. In other words, what he's arguing is that he believes from a biblical perspective, you have a right to at least support this at certain times. Nonetheless, he asserted peacefulness is the face Peacefulness is the face of a grave wrong that could only be stopped by violence. He asserted, peacefulness in the face of a grave wrong that could only be stopped by violence would be a sin. All right? In other words, if we choose peace in the face of a grave wrong that we could stop, that it would be a sin not to stop it. All right, that's his argument. Defense of oneself or others could be a necessity, especially when authorized by a legitimate authority. So if there's a legitimate authority that authorizes you to protect yourself, then he says it would be right to do so, but you have to have a legitimate authority. They who have waged war in obedience to the divine command or in conformity with his laws have represented in their persons the public justice or the wisdom of government, and in this capacity have put to death wicked men. Such persons by no means have violated the commandment, thou shalt not kill. So he makes an argument, if you're acting in light of government to protect or to do something right in a just way, and you kill someone, you have not violated the commandment, thou shalt not kill. Now, please note, that is doing what? He's giving you when you can kill and when you cannot kill. And now in the Catholic system, you have a magisterial authority that can determine how to interpret the verse. Here, what happens if I say, the Bible says thou shalt not kill, immediately what I'm going to get is people going, well, and all of you are going to have 47 different opinions. All right, that's the problem of not having a centralized authority. Who becomes the authority? You, because let's be honest, what does the scripture say? Thou shalt not kill. Now we can get into some argument about how to translate the, do you have the concordance, Sarah? Can you look up the word kill there in Exodus 20 and tell me the meaning of the Hebrew word? I don't have it in front of me. We'll go ahead and just eliminate this once and for all. See how wide of range of meaning it gives. It's Exodus 20. I don't remember the exact verse, but. All right, we'll be patient. Someone play some Jeopardy music. In Exodus 20, okay, thou shalt not kill. What is the definition for thou shalt not kill or kill?
Primitive root properly to dash in pieces, that is, kill a human being, especially to murder, to put to death, kill, slay, murder. So the Brown Driver Briggs definition to murder, slay, or kill.
All right. So it can have murder or it can have? Assassinate. That's relevant to our current situation. All right. So it means don't kill, right? Now it has a murder. A murder is implied.
It has the idea of premeditated, accidental, as an avenger, or as an intentional slayer.
All right. So basically, it covers any taking of life. All right. Now I want to make that very clear. It seems to cover any taking of life. Now, so we go with the definition, and see, this is how we play games as Christians. This is what drives me crazy. We have a Bible, right? And then when we come to a verse that we don't like, we'll try to go, well, the word means this. And in other places, well, the word means this. Guess what? All of a sudden, it doesn't mean what it says. Remember when we had the big argument here over the word forever? Remember that big debate, right? And me and Sarah was like, it means forever. And they're like, nope, it doesn't mean that. Forever doesn't mean forever. It means forever, right? Well, here, kill means kill. And it even covers accidentally. It can be intentional, premeditated, accidental. It can be assassinate, murder. It covers everything. All right. Now, there's a command, don't kill. And then when we come along and go, well, wait a minute now. Wait a minute now. Okay. Wait a minute now. It only means if I don't plant it. Well, no, that's not what the word means, right? It covers a wide range, yes? And I bet you if we look up every time that word is used, we could get the wide range of meaning. So that comes along and that requires what? So just the definition alone is not going to be sufficient, agreed? So then we're going to have to go, well, wait a minute, what about this, and what about that, and what about this, and what about this, and what about that? I just want you to know that that is why biblical interpretation is so convoluted and complicated. Right? I mean, the simple meaning of that word is not going to resolve the conflict. Yes? I mean, because I've heard sermons where they say, thou shalt not kill. Well, it should be translated, thou shalt not murder. That's not true. That word covers a wide range of meaning. It can clearly be translated, thou shalt not kill. Does it imply murder? Yes, but it implies a list of other things as well. So, how do you handle that? Well, some are going to base their entire view on what? Thou shalt not kill. Augustine comes and says, well, wait a minute. You can kill in this situation, 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 and be perfectly justifiable. Well, wait a minute. The other person is going to be like, but the word says thou shalt not kill. Well, how do you work that? These are the complicated things, all right? Augustine did not break down the conditions necessary for war to be just. All right? Augustine, nonetheless, originated the very phrase itself. I believe he's the one who uses the term just war, I think, in the book The City of God. I think that's where he first used it, but don't quote me on that. That's just memory. I could be wrong. All right? And I've got a lot more here, okay? Now, about 900 years later, who comes on the scene? Thomas Aquinas, all right? So basically, Augustine does what? Augustine establishes kind of the philosophy. And what does he kind of make for it? He gives an allowance that there can be a right time to kill. Yes? Does he give us a criteria? No, he doesn't really give us a criteria. So that means for a long time, there would have been a lot of what? Maybe this, maybe that. Could we? Maybe. Could not. All right, then Thomas Aquinas comes along. All right? And what does Thomas Aquinas do? Well, he laid out the conditions under which a war could be justified. Now, guess what he did? He combined theological principles of faith with philosophical principles of reason. So what two things did he bring together? Theology and philosophy. Or, what did you say? Faith and reason. He brought these two together. All right? Now, I've got, we could go to Summa Theologica and his book on this and the way he does so, but this is what we're going to do. If you have a Catholic catechism, go ahead and grab it. Because ultimately, Aquinas shows up here. Aquinas shows up here. And I didn't. Give me a second. I'm going to have to find it. Article 3. Wait, I think I may have passed it. No, not yet. I haven't given a page because I closed it. Third commandment. Hang on, give me a second. Sixth commandment. Back up. Here we go. I found it. All right, go to page 544 of the Catholic Catechism. Page 544 of the Catholic Catechism. Everybody got it? Say amen when you're there. All right, what's the section called? The fifth commandment. And what does it say underneath the fifth commandment? You shall not kill. All right, everybody got that? All right, if you look underneath that, it says, you have heard that it was said to the men of old, you shall not kill, and whoever kills shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be liable to judgment. All right? So they have the original, the commandment, the 10 commandment, right? Thou shalt not kill. And then they go to Jesus expanding the commandment to more than just a physical act, but even dealing with wrong anger. Everybody see that? All right? And what do they say in paragraph 2258? Human life is sacred because from its beginning it involves the creative action of God, and it remains forever in a special relationship with the Creator, who is its sole end. God alone is the Lord of life from its beginning until its end. No one can, under any circumstance, claim for himself the right directly to destroy an innocent human being. All right? They make it pretty clear. What can you not do? Kill an innocent human being. Now, that seems to be the command. Now, what are they going to do with the command? They are now going to take this command and apply it to a number of places. What's the first major section? Respect for human life. But what do they allow in page 545? Legitimate defense. All right. When can that occur? When can it not occur? All right. Leads to lots of discussion. We could get into a whole discussion here about this. Go to page 547. Intentional homicide. What do they have after intentional homicide? Abortion. Okay. What do they have on page 549? Euthanasia. All right. What do they have on page 550? Suicide, all right? Then page 551, what's this section called? Respect for the dignity of persons. Everybody see that? Okay, and then page 552, respect for the person in scientific research. And in that, then we have respect for bodily integrity. And in that, we have respect for the dead. And then what do we have after respect for the dead? Safeguarding peace. That's where we'll start. Now, I would like to work through all of this, but for time's sake, we do not. All right? Everybody ready? Here we go. Peace. By recalling the commandment, you shall not kill, our Lord asked for peace of heart and denounced murderous anger and hatred as immoral. All right? So what do they go after here in paragraph and the following? They go after what? Anger and deliberate hatred. Everybody see that? Everybody see that? They condemn that. Yes? Okay? All right. So we could talk all about here about peace, no anger, no vengeance, no deliberate hatred. They condemn all of that, and then that flows right into paragraph 2307. And this section is called Avoiding War. Avoiding war. Now, here is where we're going to dig in. I would like to take that whole safeguarding piece, but that will turn into a whole sermon itself. Here we go. The fifth commandment forbids the what? Intentional destruction of human life. Because of the evils and injustice that accompany all war, the church insistently urges everyone to prayer and to action so that the divine goodness may free us from the ancient bondage of war. Simply put, what does the church what does the Catholic Church call Catholics to do? Pray and try to avoid what? Anything that would lead to war and the bondage of war. All citizens and all governments are obliged to work for the avoidance of war. They believe everyone should avoid war at all cost. However, there's the big however. Everybody see it? As long as the danger of war persists and there is no international authority with the necessary competence and power, governments cannot be denied the right of lawful self-defense once all peace efforts have failed. Now stop right there. What must first be applied here? Peace efforts. All peace efforts have failed. If everything else has failed, then you can... Now, this is already setting up a criteria, is it not? It's already setting up a criteria. This begins to articulate the just war idea. Okay? Not everyone's always going to agree on this. Right? Not everyone's always going to agree on when they failed and when they not failed. All right, next paragraph. The strict conditions for legitimate defense by military force require rigorous consideration. The gravity of such a decision makes it subject to rigorous conditions of moral legitimacy at once and the same time. All right, now you see what's listed here? Now we're going to get into what? What are they getting ready to lay out for us? Criteria. Criteria. All right? Now, here is the criteria to determine if a war is just. We've already gotten one criteria. What's the first criteria? All peace efforts have what? Failed. Every attempt for peace has failed. Right? now. So let's just let's apply this to the current situation. Were there efforts to make peace, or did we just launch a drone strike? Okay, now we could argue past administrations have made efforts. So you see, this one's going to be complicated, is it not?
I read a news article that argued for de-escalation, to pull the troops out.
Yeah, we could have done things to de-escalate because and this is a complicated matter because why? I mean, what sparked so much hatred in the Middle East? There was already hatred. I mean, there's a lot of things. The first Gulf War, because they wanted to resolve the invasion of Saddam into Kuwait. They believed that to be a Muslim problem. They wanted to resolve it there. And then who came in? America. And when we put our boot on their soil, that sparked it. Then we invaded Iraq under the pretense that they had weapons of mass destruction, resulting in the death of all kinds of people. All right, well, okay. No one can argue that was a good thing. We invaded a country under false pretense. Okay, well then how long do we stay there? Well, when did we invade? 2003? What year is it? Who's still there? So are we applying peace? Like now again, everyone in this room is going to have a different opinion, right? I may be like, well, man, the whole war was wrong from the start, and we've still been there, and we've broken the country 15 different ways. What are we going to do? Well, then ISIS came up, and I'm like, well, now we got to be there because now we got to stop ISIS. But what do we do? And then we got the Syria situation, and then we don't want the Iranians to influence Syria. We don't want Russia, and then we can go. I mean, I did an entire hour study on the situation in Syria. It's complicated. Does that make sense? So that criteria is difficult in and of itself because some may go, well, we did try to get peace, and others were like, well, we're the ones who created the problem. So can you create the problem and then at the same time ask for peace? So it's hard, all right? So what's the next thing they have here? What's the first criteria they have listed here? The damage inflicted by the aggressor on the nation or community of nations must be lasting, grave, and certain. What is that establishing? Right, the people, the aggressor, what they're doing, it must do this. It must be lasting, grave, and certain. Lasting, grave, and certain aggression. Lasting, grave, and certain aggression. All right? Does that make sense? Yes? Then you can do something. But it's got to reach that criteria. I don't even know at times when people... I don't even think the average Christian ever considers this, right? Whenever there's a chance for war, this is what I never hear a bunch of Christian men standing around talking. Well, the aggressor, their aggression has been lasting, it's been grave, and it's been certain. I usually don't hear Christian men speaking that. Right? They're just like, well, they've got to go. All right, what's next? All other means of putting an end to it must have been shown to be impractical or ineffective. So what do we have to show? That everything that we've tried to do has been impractical or ineffective. All right? Now wait a minute. This complicates the Middle East, right? It complicates. When you're the country who invaded another country under false pretense that resulted, depending on the statistics, you look like close to 1 million people dying, it's hard for you to look like you're the one who's done everything to make peace. In other words, you've kind of lost the moral high ground, correct? Now, you could talk about Afghanistan, and you're like, well, that's a little bit more complicated. Iraq is not a complicated situation. We were the aggressor under a false pretense. So how do we work that? And then where did we kill this general? In Iraq. All right? Okay, so how do we work all of that? All right? What's next? What's the next criteria? It's right there in the book. There must be serious prospects of success. You've got to know it's going to be successful. Why do you think they would make that a criteria? If it's not, because what's the ultimate goal? Peace. If it's not going to look like it's going to be successful and it's going to be this long, drawn-out 17, 18-year-old conflict where people keep dying, then the consequences of your action is not going to be one of peace, but more people are going to die, more people are going to suffer, so therefore you should not engage in it unless you know there is a chance for success. All right? Does that make sense? So And again, every situation you have to okay, what did we think? What were we going to accomplish? What were we going to accomplish? What was the success? When we've been in Afghanistan since 2001, it's 2020. That's a long war, people. A long war, and people keep dying. Last 2019, I think the number of American troops killed in Afghanistan, I can't remember, it reached a mark of increase. People are still dying. Now, you may not see it on the news all the time, but troops are still dying. Well, is that successful after 19 years? Right? That's a question. Now, again, these are criteria. Now, are these criteria black and white? No, we can look at the situation like, okay, our country is getting ready to get into a war. What should we do? Don't know. But what do we have here? A criteria. Now, is this criteria nationalistic? No. But do Christians talk this way? No, they do not. And what's next? Yeah, the use of arms must not produce evils and disorders graver than the evil to be eliminated. Hence, you can't go into a country and so break a country that you do more damage than the good you intended to do. If you go out and take, this guy is a really bad guy, let's kill him, let's eliminate him, and then the country falls into sectarian violence and a civil war and millions of people die, you didn't do right. That's why the war when we invaded Iraq, it was not a just war. It was wrong, it was immoral, it was ungodly, and should be condemned by all Christians. But Christians still want to justify it. There's no justifying it. We broke a country. And by breaking the country, what came out of it? ISIS. Hey, here's what we should probably do. If we're going to go to a country that's predominantly Muslim, maybe we should know before we invade an Islamic country. Maybe we should think if we remove that bad person, who's going to be the other person who takes over? We're going to stay there and tell you who you can put in power. So now we're taking over a country and we're going to try to control the country and we're going to try to organize its government. Because according to Bush, in the heart of every person beats a desire for democracy. What kind of nonsense is that? No, it doesn't. Right? Because in the heart of every person is depravity, not democracy. Okay, he had democracy. His view of human nature was democracy is in the heart of every person. A Christian view is in the heart of every person is depravity. And how many times when we say, let's let those people over there make a decision to elect someone, and what does America always do when they elect someone? You've elected a dictator, and they're a terrorist. We need to remove them. Well, wait a minute. Do we believe in their democratic principles, or do we want our democratic principles? And you go from country to country. Egypt, you go from Palestinian Authority. The Palestinians say, this is who we want in charge, and then we're like, they're a terrorist. Well, they were elected by them. Who gets to determine who's the terrorist? I guess we do, right? Right? So then we go in, you see what happens? Like, we've got to think these things through deeper. So again, what's this? The use of arms must not produce evils and disorders graver than the evil to be eliminated. The power of modern means of destruction weighs very heavy in evaluating this condition. What is that saying? Hey, that place poses a threat, so let's drop bombs. Well, if the bombs create a greater evil and greater destruction than the threat you're eliminating, then it's not justified. If I need to take out Joel, right? And by doing so, let's say I wait till Joel goes to school. I don't know how many people go, what school, what's it called? Okay, how many? 300 plus, and I drop a bomb. I get Joel, but I kill 300 other people. It's a greater evil. Unless I can prove that Joel is a greater threat, then that's worth the killing of 300 other people. Now, what we typically Americans say is, well, that's just a part of war. That's just can't help it. Sometimes innocent people got to die. Now, again, I got no problem when atheists say those kinds of things. I have problems when Christians say those kinds of things. Because that's not a Christian mind. The Christian mindset was like, well, 300 people just got sent into eternity. That's not good. And we got one bad guy and we killed 300 people. And typically what happens, because we killed the one bad guy and killed 300 people, now we got 30,000 people who are even more angry at us because we killed 300 people. And guess what they want to do? Then they want to kill us, which then creates greater evil. Does that make sense? So what's this view here? The use of arms must not produce evils and disorders greater than the evil to be eliminated. Joel may be a bad evil. Is he worth 300 other people? You would have to make an argument. Is that always black and white? Right. We took out two leaders, Soleimani and Mashadi. I think is how you say his last name, right? A militia leader. Okay. We took out two. Now, other people were killed in the strike. Those two. Now, what's been the result? I think you may argue a greater evil has now been unleashed. Now you had everyone, and now Iran's we're going to kill Americans anywhere we can find them. We'll just kill anyone we can find. We'll just full out open war. We're going to run up the red flag on top of the mosque. We're going to call for the destruction of everyone. Now, if they start killing Americans everywhere, then did we create a greater evil? One could argue we did. Does that make sense? That's how to rationalize this, okay? What's the next one? Now, if you see underneath it, these are the traditional elements enumerated in what is called the Just War Doctrine. Everybody see that? Is that a lot? That's not really a lot of criteria, is it? Not too many, right? So let's go through them again. What's the first major criteria? What should be the goal? All peace is the goal. That's number one. Number two, let's make sure we put them in order. Number one, peace is the goal. Number two, all peace efforts must fail before we can do anything. All right. Then next, the damage inflicted by the aggressor on the nation or community or nations must be lasting, grave, and certain. So it's got to be lasting, grave, and certain damage done by the aggressor before we do anything. Next, all or means of putting an end to it must have been shown to be impractical or ineffective. Well, we tried A, B, C, D, E, impractical, ineffective. Next, it's got to be a serious prospect of success. You've got to really know you're going to... And this is very important, especially in light of what happened with Korea and what happened in Vietnam. Was that success? I mean, you can argue, how successful was it? Don't know, right? Next. Yeah, do not create a greater evil. Do not create greater problems. Do not create greater damage. You cannot do that. And those are the traditional elements. Now, what do they say after this? The evaluation of these conditions for moral legitimacy belongs to the prudential judgment of those who have responsibility for the common good. Well, who are they giving the responsibility to consider these factors? Those who have a responsibility for common good. The leadership should be thinking this way. Public authorities in this case have the right and duty to impose on citizens the obligations necessary for national defense. That is allowing for what? What does that paragraph allow for? Draft. Okay, for the draft, okay? And trust me, everybody went crazy worried about the draft this week, okay? The site that gives you all the information about the draft crashed because so many young people were looking it up, afraid that we were going to World War III. In fact, World War III was trending on Twitter for like 24 hours, okay? So, a lot of people got concerned about what's happening, all right? Those who are sworn to serve their country in the armed forces are servants of the security and freedom of nations. If they carry out their duty honorably, they truly contribute to the common good of the nation and the maintenance of peace. That allows for people to be in the military, doesn't prohibit it. Public authorities should make equitable provision for those who, for reasons of conscience, refuse to bear arms. These are nonetheless obliged to serve the human community in some other way, right? A conscientious objector, the United States military allows for that. In the first Gulf War, I worked with someone who was a conscientious objector and refused to do anything. Now, we were medical, so I don't know what he was refusing to do, but okay, I think he was refusing to go is what he was refusing to do, but yeah. All right. The church and human reason both assert the permanent validity of the moral law during armed conflict. The mere fact that war has regrettably broken out does not mean that everything becomes licit between the warring parties. All right. Simply put, what do they claim? Yeah, the moral law still. War breaks out, you don't forget the moral law. The war breaks out, you don't forget right and wrong. And that's, again, sometimes Christians just forget, hey, let's just take everyone out. And I'm like, no, that's not the way we do this. All right. Okay, and now, the next page, where do they move to? Non-combatants, wounded soldiers, and prisoners must be respected and treated. Oh, controversial. All right? Controversial. Now, everybody remember the debate over waterboarding? Everybody ever seen waterboarding? Okay, pull someone back, put a towel over their face. They're held back like this. You pour the water, and they feel like they are drowning. And you do this ultimately to elicit panic, anxiety, horrible things happen to them, and then they ultimately, hopefully, they will give information, right? Other things that have been used, waterboarding, what are some other things that are used? Sleep deprivation, dogs, having them stand in certain positions, maybe nude, to bring about humiliation, sometimes beatings, other things to go after the prisoners. These raise questions on morality. Now, some Christians are like, hey, they're terrorists, do whatever you want to them. That's not the Christian way of thinking. How should a prisoner of war be handled? Now, I was medical in the military. Our view is we treat them right? And this is why the rest of the military hates us. If we're in the middle of an armed conflict, right? Bobby's an American soldier, okay? Miss Goodlet, she's a spy from some foreign nation. With we hear her accent, we don't trust her, right? Okay, and they're both wounded, and they end up at our medical tent. Guess what I do? Do I see the uniform? I don't care about the uniform. I'm going to do triage. She's more severely wounded. She needs care. Guess who I'm going to care for? Her. And guess what all those American soldiers are going to start saying to us medical people? They're going to get mad. I'm like, I don't care about your flag on your shoulder. I don't care. Care about the human being. You see why medical was much more for me, okay? Okay, much more for me, okay? Because I don't care who gets mad. Okay, that's a human being. And they're like, but they are an enemy. But they're a human being. That's the way we're supposed to handle it in a medical perspective. And that happens even in local hospitals. Cops get mad. Cop can be shot, and then the person who shot the cop gets shot, but the one who shot the cop is more severely wounded. Who does the medical people take care of? And guess who? Everybody gets mad at the medical people. Everyone gets mad at the medical people. And you're like, get over yourself. That's the way everyone does. And I understand that, like, on one hand, you want to go all Hollywood, right? Hey, torture the people and get the information. But it's not a movie. It's not a movie. Now, I know that raises serious questions, and I know it's not. I'm not pretending that it's easy. Okay, I'm not pretending that it's easy. I mean, if I'm in the United States Air Force and, Miss Goodlett just took out, 13 people who I work with, right? They're dead. She's responsible for killing them, right? And then she's brought in on a stretcher. Guess what's going to come out inside of me? Set her over there. We'll get to her later. And trust me, that's happened. You can't argue that that's not going to happen. That's going to happen. They're going to call for how they must be treated, and they must be treated in a humane way. They must be treated in a correct way. Actions deliberately contrary to the law of nations and to the universal principles are crimes, as are the orders that command such actions. In the military, I think Stephen and Mr. Goodlett can speak of this. We got briefings about lawful orders and unlawful orders. Yes? What are we supposed to do with an unlawful order? Okay, we don't have to obey an unlawful order, right? And what could be an unlawful order? There's a number of things that could reach that criteria, right? Remember all the justifications they give for a law? Okay, when I got that briefing, I was all into this because I'm like, oh, this is interesting stuff because I like the ability to disobey orders, okay? Right? So I wanted to write down, like, that's an unlawful order. I called every order was an unlawful order. I can't go to lunch to noon. I'm going to starve to death. That's an unlawful order. I'm leaving at 11. Okay, right? You want me to go outside and it's 78? That's too hot. Okay, that's unlawful. I always was saying it was unlawful. They were always telling me to shut up. Everything was unlawful. Okay, anything I didn't want to do was unlawful. Okay, and I always would bring out every regulation I would have, and I would have it highlighted. I'm like, this is an unlawful order, and nobody took me serious. But I tried my best. But no, that was important to me because it was a philosophical. I'm like, ooh, the military, we got philosophy going on here. Woo, this is good stuff. Nobody else cared. I think everybody else was asleep during the briefing. I think I was the only one awake. Okay, but because that's an interesting thing. But these raises lots of questions. You remember all the what happened in the prison there in Iraq? What was the name of the prison? Do you remember? Okay, in Iraq. Okay, where we found all of those pictures of what they were doing to the prisoners. It was some pretty messed up stuff, right? That was a big outcry. Yeah. Remember that? Remember all the outrage that happened over that? And it was everywhere? Okay, and you had some people who were saying what? Who cares? Who cares? And others were saying, that's messed up. Okay. Again, I will bring up Guantanamo Bay over and over and over. That whole situation bothers me to no end. You just take someone off, hey, they're suspected terrorists. Boom! Put them in the back of a plane, put a hood over their head, drop them off there, and then do they have any right to prove that they're a terrorist? No. How long can we keep them? Indefinite. And you're like, well, wait a minute. So this person just gets taken, and they're like, you're a terrorist. And they're like, well, do I get to prove I'm a terrorist? Do I get to prove I'm not? Nope. How long do I be here? No. Do I have any representation? No. And we just classify them as a prisoner of war, but in many cases, we take them from a situation where there's not even a declared war. Like, well, it's the war on terror. Okay, well, what does that mean? Who are we fighting? Like, that raises lots of not only constitutional questions, at least moral questions. These are questions every Christian should struggle with. But what always bothers me is all these things are happening, and guess what most Christians do? Turn off their device, close the newspaper. Who cares? I'm a Christian. But as a Christian, we have to think biblically about what's happening in our world. These are happening in our world. I don't know what's going to happen in this situation. I don't know. You don't know. Right? I don't know. Does it look bad right now? Yes, it looks really bad right now. Looks really bad. By the time we get home, who knows what other news is broken about it? Who knows what's going to happen Monday? I've been staying up all night listening to the BBC talk about it, for hour after hour after hour, and it's just like crazy, all the things happening. I don't know what's going to develop, but guess what? If this situation turns out to be nothing, there's going to be another one at some point, correct? And at every step of the way, as you're a Christian trying to navigate this world, what is your responsibility? To think about these situations from a biblical perspective. The historic church gave us what to help us try to think about this situation? They gave us the Just War Doctrine. You now have the criteria for it, right? You have it. If you didn't write it down, you got the catechism there. You can take the catechism and copy it down. Why should you have it down? Whenever these situations come. Now, we're not bound by Just War Doctrine as Protestants. We're not. We're bound to, though, think about it biblically. Just War Doctrine is an attempt to do this. Just War Doctrine, remember all those things I mentioned in the last hour? The sword, love for the enemy, sanctity of human life, thou shalt not kill. And we looked at the Hebrew word, and it carries every meaning is involved in thou shalt not kill, not just murder, even accidental killing is mentioned. Right? All of that. You have all of these biblical facts. And is that hard to figure out how to apply that? It's almost impossible. So the early church said, here's a criteria. Is that criteria perfect? Is it comprehensive? No. But what does it give you? A framework. And so when you're looking at the news, you should stop and go, how should we think about this? How should we think about this? And guess what's not going to drive my way of thinking? Nationalism? What else? Politics? What else? Legality? Okay? Those things are not going to drive it. A biblical thing is going to drive it. Am I going to consider it from those other perspectives? Yeah, I'm going to consider the legality of it. Am I going to consider the strategy of it? Yes, I'm going to consider the strategy of it. Am I going to consider it from a political standpoint? I'm going to be influenced by politics just like you're influenced by politics, right? Am I going to be influenced from a nationalistic perspective? Probably not me. All of you may be influenced from, since I'm as probably as anti-nationalism as you can get in many cases. I'm not going to look at it from that perspective, but I can still be influenced by it, right? For example, when we go into a country and we try to do nation building, we're in Afghanistan spending trillions of dollars building schools and electric grids and all of this stuff. Sometimes you're like, I understand the strategy of it because you're trying to make the people love us, but they're not going to love us because in many cases it's an ideological divide that our government doesn't understand because they don't understand religion. All right. So then, why are we spending trillions over there trying to build this stuff when we got trillions that could go here? Right. So, that's a nationalistic approach. So even nationalism influences me from that perspective. So we're all influenced by these things. You just got to acknowledge when the influence is there, and what's the most driving force that we have to continue to go back to time and time again? We've got a Bible that's got a lot of conflicting, not really conflicting, but different perspectives that we have to try to pull in together. Do not kill. Okay, well, what is that? How does that work? Okay. Love your enemy. Well, how in the world is that supposed to work? Okay. Turn the other cheek. Resist not evil. Do good to them who persecute you. Well, Peter's telling, Jesus is your example. Well, his example was, take me and crucify me. I would say, well, that was meant to happen. Well, Peter uses it as an example for us and how to handle fiery trials and persecution. He's telling us how to handle it. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, wait a minute. The government doesn't bear the sword in vain. Okay, well, that means the government can do something. Well, wait, if the government gives me the authority to do something, then I can do. These are all complicated issues. The early church at least tried to say, let's put all of these concepts together, and this is what we get. Now, you may say, I don't agree with it, but if you don't agree with it, you've got to replace it with what? Something better. And it's got to be something that comes from where? Scripture, not from where? Politics, nationalism, strategy, or legality. It's got to come from something other, right? Those other factors can play into your viewpoint, but it's got to be viewed by that. The main thing I want you to take away from this morning is that you live in a world, and your job as a Christian is to think biblically about what happens in the world. Pay attention to what's going on. But think about it biblically. Is it easy to do? No. Do you like all the points in the just war theory? Some of you may not like all the points. I don't know. Sometimes I like them. Sometimes I struggle with them. I don't know. Those are hard things to apply. That's what I want you. Don't get caught up in anything else. If you take anything else from this morning, you miss the point. The point is think biblically and pay attention to what's happening in the world. And if I get emails from people accusing anything else, you've missed the point. That's the point. Do I have all the answers? No. Do you have all the answers? No. Does anybody have all the answers? But what I do know is this is the answer. We are called to think biblically about what's happening in our world. This is a serious event. We need to know what's happening. And this is not going to be the only one. There's going to be, every year there's some, correct? And every year we have to think biblically about it. All right, let's pray. Lord God, we come before you this morning. Lord, a complicated subject. I pray that we will give this, I hope this leads to interesting conversations amongst the families here, that they will discuss these things amongst themselves and struggle with these things. And I pray that as the world is debating about these things, that we can offer a rational, biblical perspective. And we can't expect the world to think this way, but we should offer a different way of thinking because we are called to be different. And I pray that we are in this area. We ask this in Jesus' name. And God's people said,